Okay, so in this last video for our memory chapter, we are looking at how we can enhance memory, or more specifically, techniques you can use that will hopefully help you on your exams. Um, so First of all, we have already mentioned ways to improve short-term memory, which were maintenance rehearsal and chunking. So maintenance rehearsal is that repetition of information until you have a chance to use it. Or chunking, where we're chunking numbers, information into more manageable chunks that we're able to remember. There's another type of rehearsal, which is aimed more at improving long-term memory. So elaborative rehearsal is a technique in which you think about the meaning of the information and relate it to knowledge already stored. So again, think back to oh, my mind is blanking. One of the earlier videos when we were looking at encoding, in order to really remember it, you want to encode information on as deep of a level as possible. And one way that you can do that is by really connecting the information to information you already have stored, information you already remember. So you're really trying to add meaning to the information that you have in a way that means something to you. So using personal examples as you're learning about different concepts, try to connect this to your own lives. Try to find examples in your own life, because when you're sitting there on the exam and you're thinking, oh, what does this concept mean again? If you can think, oh yeah, I had that example from my own life, that memory that you're much more likely to be able to remember because it's something personal, that will then hopefully trigger your memory of what that concept means. So elaborative rehearsal, you are elaborating on the information, you are adding to it, adding meaning, adding personal information to that, connecting to it somehow. Mnemonic, sorry, my brain's not working right now. Mnemonic devices. The M is silent. Mnemonic devices are memory aids that help us organize information as we're encoding it and then help us remember it later. So I have another slide on this. Obviously in that last video, or not the last one, the one before that on forgetting, I mentioned that my little technique for remembering the difference between retrograde and anterograde amnesia is anterograde begins with an A, and it's referring to memories lost after, or the inability to form memories after the trauma, and retro, I think old, and that is referring to the loss of old memories from before the trauma. So that would technically be a mnemonic. Okay, so that's my little trick for remembering that. Or the other one I've used before is to remember what the hippocampus does. If you saw a hippo on campus, you would remember where you saw it. So these little tricks. So a common way is to use rhymes. So, for example, I know in America, when you learn which months have 30 days and which ones don't, I've been told that the technique you all learn as kids is to use your knuckles. I'd never heard of that until teaching this. In England, we are taught a rhyme, which I only know the beginning of, and it is 30 days, hath September, April, June, and November. All the rest, something, something, something. I don't remember it, but I remember enough that I know which months have 30 days and which ones don't. Okay, a little trick for doing it. Formulas can be mnemonics. So I don't know if this is really counted as a formula or more of a rhyme, but my very easy method just speeds up naming planets. The first letter corresponds to the first letter of the planets in the order that they are in. So that helps you to remember the order of the planets. In algebra, some of you may remember learning to use FOIL, where you're expanding brackets and you do first, outer, inner, last. That's a mnemonic. For music, so to remember the different notes, we've got E, G, B, D, F. Every good boy does fine. The other one I learned for in between is face, F-A-C-E. These are little memory tricks. Visualization is another way. So if you are, especially if you're a visual learner, finding a way to visualize some of the concepts as you're studying them. Maybe you need to draw things out so that in the exam, you can visualize that information. You can remember what you drew. Another way that this works, so for me, when I've studied for exams in the past, quite often I write out my notes over and over and over and over again, which may seem a little much, but By the time I got to my exams, I could visualize my notes on the page. I would highlight them, I would underline things, and I did that in the same way over and over and over again so that I could then visualize that on the page, and that helped me. Creating stories is a great way. So to give you an example of what this would look like, usually in class I would show you this and I'd give you a minute to try to remember these and try to apply creating a story. So if I was trying to memorize all of these words, I would create a story out of them. So I would imagine, this is also combining visualization here because I would picture this in my head. In my story, I've got a monkey and a cat. They're hanging out together. It's a white cat. The cat is drinking a cup of tea and reading a book by the fire. Okay. The monkey is eating a cold ice cream. He is sitting by the window. And there is also a plant on one side of him and a lamp on the other side. And he's watching a funny video. I can't remember if I mentioned that. So that is my story, and that is what would help me remember all of these different words. Memory games, that is a great way to strengthen your memory. It's something I love doing. I have all of these different apps on my phone. Lumosity has some good ones, but there are a lot of other good memory games that you can download. And you can kind of think of memory as a muscle. The more you're using it, the better it's going to get. So you can try using memory games. Encode information in more than one way. So as I mentioned in a past video, simply reading the information is not going to be enough, because not only are you only encoding the information in one way, you're also encoding it at a very shallow level. You want to encode it in as many ways as possible. So that's why you'll probably, at least when I was teaching in class, you will have seen that I include videos and activities and obviously my regular lecturing, but I'm trying to provide you the information in different ways. So part of it is really figuring out what works for you. Are you more visual? Do you need to hear the information? Do you need to actually practice applying the information? That's usually going to help most people. So figuring out what works for you, but regardless of that, do it in multiple ways. Maybe watch videos on the concepts, maybe read about the concepts. A great way of improving your memory of these concepts is to try teaching someone else. In order to be able to teach a concept, you really have to understand it. And you don't even need to teach another person. You can practice teaching your pets. I've actually in the past practiced teaching my dogs things just to get into the practice of talking about different concepts. So try encoding the information that way. Take your time. Now, a lot of professors will tell you, do not cram before an exam. I'm not going to tell you not to do that, because for some of you, that's how you learn. Honestly, for me, I have crammed for exams. I will, not the night before, but a week before, I would start cramming because that's what works for me. It's really about knowing your strengths and weaknesses and how you learn best. But what I will say is don't try to cram the night before, because there's too much information. And if you're doing that, it probably means you're not getting enough sleep, which brings me, let me skip down to sleep. We've already discussed that sleep is very, very important for memory. And there is a lot of research showing that people's memory abilities decrease with sleep deprivation. So the last thing you want to be doing the night before an exam is cramming so much that you don't sleep. For most people, they are better off spreading that work out, the amount that you have to study, into manageable chunks. But again, whatever works for you. Pay attention. Again, this just comes back to encoding. If you're not paying attention in the first place, you're not going to encode the information, so you won't be able to remember it. And then monitor your learning. So sometimes we think we know something, we think we're going to remember it, and then you get to the exam and you have no idea what the answer is. Test yourself as you go. Use practice questions. You can find resources online to do that, or again, trying to teach other people as a way of monitoring how much you've really learned. But the point is, by monitoring your learning, you can find out where there are gaps and where you need to spend more time. Otherwise, it gets very easy to think, yeah, I understood that, I know that, I'm going to remember that on the exam, and then by the time you get to the exam, your memory of that is gone. So keep monitoring your learning to evaluate where you need to spend more time. Okay, so there's a few things that will hopefully help you prepare a little bit more for the exams.